Greetings, everybody. It's Jim. Hey, I've been wanting to do a role-playing video for a while now. It's just that I caught the wargaming bug because I got that plexiglass and I've been putting a lot of war games under it. I can't say I regret it whatsoever because I've been playing a lot and it's really fun. And I'm going to definitely have that Car Wars video out to you soon, okay? But I was on the forums today and I was typing away a response to a question that people were having about the future of the fantasy trip because they did a survey, and they were talking about what it could mean, what it could not mean, and stuff like that, and which way should they go and stuff. And I've got some experience on this because I've had my own game store, and now, of course, I'm working closely with marketing, with Columbia Games and seeing what's going on with Harn World there. And of course, I've been working with Steve Jackson just on some things for the fantasy trip, whether it be the articles in Hexagram, the Labyrinth Encounter cards I made with him, and then my brother's working on the bestiary, the artwork for the bestiary that's upcoming and finally coming to fruition. I'm really looking forward to that. Anyway, like I said, I was going up on a forum, and I was for the fantasy trip, and I was just checking it out. And but before I get into that, I wanted to show off Big Red over here, which is a nice little figure that I had painted by a guy called JT Steiger. He's very good painter. He goes all across for competitions for Warhammer 40K. You should see his stuff. Now the thing is about this, I specifically asked him, and this is how you can tell a good artist and a professional. I asked him specifically, can you make this look old school? Because I see a lot of his Warhammer stuff. As you know, Warhammer and even modern Dungeons and Dragons, everything's really peacocky, right? Everything's out to get you. It's like boom, boom, boom. I wanted this subdued and more old school. I wanted it to look like, and you could see there's lots of shading on that. Okay, everything's really good on it. It's just very subdued, and it just looks menacing. I love it. Love the eyes specifically. That is the 7 Hex Dragon from the fantasy trip, the original model from Martian Metals. Okay, so I picked that up. I found it on eBay. There's another one that's actually a 4 Hex Dragon that's on there for only $20. Somebody should pick that up. I'll put a link down there below if it's still there. But I'll also put the link down for JT's work, so you can go to his place and see that, because he works at my favorite game store in Washington, which is called Dark Tower Games in Bellingham, Washington. Definitely a unique atmosphere there, professional looking. Yet you go in there and there's a lot of cinematic display all over the place. Okay, it's pretty cool. Yet it's a very structured place too for tournaments and stuff. Really great atmosphere there. But anyway, today, like I said, I was going over the forums and they were talking about what I'm going to be talking over with you is the future of the fantasy trip. All right, so there's some speculation of what that survey from Steve Jackson Games meant, right? What was it going to say? What I can tell you from marketing and sending out surveys on my own for Columbia Games for their role-playing game, or setting, I should say, Harn World, the fantasy medieval role-playing setting, and for their war gamers, and I sent out a survey not just to those two groups of fans of ours, our customer base, but I also sent the same survey out to the general public as well, because it was going to get two different results, because both our customers are very eclectic taste. They're very specific. For instance, Harm World, this shouldn't be a surprise. They want that medieval setting. They want that groundedness of it. They don't want high fantasy. I mean, you can play high fantasy if you want, but our customers are like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't turn it into the new Coke. Okay, I don't know if you remember that fiasco. They changed the formula for Coca-Cola and everybody went haywire. It's like, no, you don't change it, especially when you have a dedicated base that is constantly buying it. It almost made me wonder if it was a publicity stunt more than a real thing to that point. But I digress, nonetheless. So I really expect what Steve Jackson and company find about the Fantasy Trip survey is they're going to find what they already know. They're going to be able to take that deep breath of, I knew it, sometimes it's good to have that, because especially if you got cash flow, not cash flow problems, but every company's got to worry about cash flow. It's like, hey, should we put out this book? Should we go in this direction? Especially in an environment with the economy the way it is right now. Even if your personal economy is good, with all the talk about gas and inflation, people are still going to kind of tighten the wallets just a little. I can see it online, people posting stuff on some forums trying to sell their games. They're finding out that now's the time to crack down. or just calm down what they're buying and only buying the games that they're really into, which is good for companies like Columbia Games, which has got dedicated following, and of course Steve Jackson Games as well. Those things won't go down. It's just that maybe newer things will. Now, speaking of newer things, one of the things I might find out that will be interesting is to see what they do with their new fantasy trip lines. What I mean by that is their miniatures. They're going to make terrain. Who knows? I mean, dice. I mean, all those secondary products. Those are the ones that are a little bit more speculative. Those are going to be the ones that, they got some numbers on it, but they can't tell if they should keep going in that direction or not. And the survey is really going to give them some, pause if they don't get a good response. If they didn't get a good response out of the numbers, if they don't get a good response out of the survey, that's going to be a double whammy, and that might lift some eyebrows there. Okay, so one of the things that they were talking about was also opening up the fantasy trip to the open gaming license idea, right? Let anybody make their own company up and start producing product for the fantasy trip. Sounds all well and good, and definitely Dungeons & Dragons did it, but there's a reason they did, and it did backfire on them too, but it would definitely be detrimental for the fantasy trip in Steve Jackson Games. Okay, now Steve Jackson Games already has a license out there. It's out to Gaming Ballistic, Douglas Cole and gang. And the thing is, they've already come out with 10 modules, and they've all been great. David Pulver wrote some up that I've done videos for. And the thing is, Steve's smart for have done that because he knew he had Car Wars and all these other games coming up, big projects, and he's like, I got to have some more TFT content out there, and I got to have it faster. I got to get somebody else in. But their company's still a small company. They can only go so many directions at once. So it's still good because they have some control. Steve still has some control in some ways. I don't know the particulars to the contract, but I imagine Doug's got the contract for maybe so many years. Steve knows he's going to have some guaranteed quality. Maybe he gets take a look at things before they're produced, etc., etc. I'm not sure, but definitely there's some controls there. Now, unlike the OGL that Dungeons & Dragons came up with, Wizards of the Coast, and said, go ahead and do whatever you want. Because the idea was, for Wizards of the Coast, when they came out with the OGL, was to get the free advertising. Okay, got everybody dreaming about being their own company and doing Dungeons & Dragons for a living, right? Not a bad idea. Okay, but in Dungeons & Dragons, the guys at WotC knew that, hey, we got the deep pockets. There's going to be a lot of mediocre stuff coming out there, but at the end of the day, we've got the best writers, we got the best artists, and people are going to want the official stuff anyway. We're not going to lose. And that worked up until 4th edition came out. Then they bit themselves in the butt by coming out with 4th edition, which was so different than 3.5 that everybody, there's a lot of reasons why people didn't like it, but one of them was 3.5 people invested hundreds of dollars in books, maybe even 1,000 or more, and they're like, what, this is not compatible anymore? Not that they couldn't play anymore, but now nothing more was going to be produced, and that kind of ticked a lot of people the wrong way. So lo and behold, because of the OGL though, Pathfinder came along and said, hey, we'll tweak just a few things and stuff, and we'll make our own and be using the OGL. We can use a good amount of what you give us, and bam, they got Pathfinder. And so the next thing you know, Wizards of the Coast got made their own competition. All right. Now, maybe not so much anymore for 5th edition, but it doesn't matter. Every dollar that Pathfinder gets is a dollar out of WotC's pocket. You want another example? Here's one. Old School Essentials just ended a couple of days ago. And this is a beautiful looking old school fantasy thing based on old school Dungeons & Dragons. That's Errol Otis, as you know, the artist Errol Otis from Dungeons & Dragons. And if you ever see the inside of these pocket digest sized books, they are nicely laid out and easy to read. And so that's another thing. Now, if there's anything the fantasy trip can learn about making a new game that's going to attract maybe some younger players, it might be the format of their books. Get some more look and feel in there. That would probably be a good idea, because this is $250,000 here for something that people already had. I mean, think about that. People already have the Dungeons & Dragons SRD. You have all the rules already. I can download them right now, print them out for free. But here, these guys said, hey, you know what? Let's put it in a different layout and hire some artists. Hey, we got $750,000. Hooray! I mean, what's wrong with that? But the thing is, again, if Wizards of the Coast had the gumption to do this themselves, they would have made the $750,000. So there's that. All right, so the last thing I'm going to talk about as far as the OGL goes is with Grey Coast Press. Okay, now Stefano Sullivan came up with an idea that was the most innovative thing in role playing for decades, and that was the Fudge System. Now, you may or may not have heard of the Fudge System, but if you look up here, you'll see a little die up here. That might look a little familiar to you, and you might say, hey, Jim, isn't that the Fate System? And you'd be right, but it was the Fudge System before it was ever the Fate System. Now, the Fate System is definitely different on it. They've done a lot of changes to it, but the thing is, it is essentially the Fudge System. Stefano Sullivan, of course, making an OGL for everybody to use anything, and then the Fate System came along and said, yeah, we'll do that. So they used their system, added stuff to it, extrapolated on it, made some really good changes. I love them. There's no doubt about it. But the thing is, it's now dwarfed Fudge. Now, I don't know, Stefano Sullivan, doesn't get any money from it. I don't know. I really don't think he gets as much fame as he should from it. I mean, it's not like Fate's required. The guys at Evil Hat are required to do it. But I would like to see Stefano Sullivan get some recognition out there. I mean, if Gary Gygax can get recognition for Dungeons and Dragons, Steve Jackson can get recognition for the Fantasy Trip, even though it was under Metagaming's hoof for a long time. I would like to see Stefano Sullivan get some credit for being the grandfather for Fate Core, so it's all things like that. It's about power, control, recognition, money, all of it with the open gaming license. If that would happen with Fudge, if that would have happened to Wizards of the Coast, it would never have happened to Wizards of the Coast because they got enough money and recognition that everybody knows. Everybody knows that even though Gary Gygax hasn't been alive for a long time now, everybody's going to know that Gary Gygax is the father of Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, that's just the way it is. He's got that much fame. But when you're a smaller company, you risk being let out into obscurity because you're just not as much of a household name. So that's one of the things I'd worry about that. All right, so one of the things that was talked about was the idea of bringing new blood into the game. And of course, every industry worries about this. When I had a game store, I would always have a lot of repeat customers, but at the end of the year, I'd always lose a lot because, you graduated, you go to college, or you were at college and you graduated and went home, or you got married and you had kids, and then all of a sudden your priorities really change, right? But you're always looking for new blood. And of course, mine would come at the beginning of the year. I'd say, hey, freshman, here you go. Here's some decks. Here's some miniatures. Go paint. Have some fun, and maybe I'll get a new customer, right? Now, for Columbia Games, it's a little bit tougher because, they got two great genres. They got historical wargaming, three of the best war games of all time on Board Game Geek, and they've got Harn World, which is 1,000,000 words in print, and it's based on medieval fantasy. The problem is they are very much a niche market. They are buckets. Okay, that only can fill a certain type of people, right? And it's only people that are over 40 that are actually going to appreciate these things. Because, some people always play Dungeons & Dragons. Some people always play Warhammer. All right. But at the same time, there are going to be people that want to gravitate to a more realistic version of the same. All right. For instance, for wargaming, it's kind of like you got Risk, then you got Warhammer 40K, then you got Memoir 44, then you've got Julius Caesar, East Front, Advanced Squad Leader. It's the bucket gets smaller and smaller. Now, once you get to that bucket, you don't jump out of it. That's your bucket. The further down you go, you don't move around a lot. You may move up a little bit. I don't know. Advanced Squad Leader players might be able to play Memoir 44, or would they consider that too late? I'm not sure. But here's the thing, though. When it comes to Steve Jackson, he's got a little bit of hope to catch the more mainstream audience with the Fantasy Trip. But how does he do it? The main thing is why I'm showing this old school essentials page again. It's because of the look. There's nothing wrong with the look of his game. It had an old school look, old school feel, but it doesn't. But then again, so does this, and it got $750,000. So what's the difference here? Well, the difference is maybe, first off, you got Errol Otis. Now, granted, you got Liz Danforth, you got Rick Hershey and stuff like that. But I mean, but the thing is, when you look at the PDF again, that layout is beautiful. Go check it out. But the bottom line is, if you can do it's $750,000 for the same thing you had for free. Everybody that has this has it already for free. You can download all this stuff for free from Dungeons & Dragons website. You already have this. But these guys just reskinned it. That's all it is. So if they can do that, Steve Jackson can redo in the Labyrinth. They can redo the Fantasy Trip. And one other thing is probably make a decision whether you're going to call it the Fantasy Trip or in the Labyrinth. That's another thing. And I don't know if In the Labyrinth is a name that's going to catch on as much as Fantasy Trip. I think most people call, hey, you want to play the Fantasy Trip anyway. So, maybe it's time to let In the Labyrinth kind of go. Another thing would be, like I said, the layout. Would I change the format of what you see first, second, third, like, character creation, skills, spells, and such like that? I don't know about all that, but one thing I do know is you might want to change the titles for, Advanced Combat and Advanced Magic. Because if you've never picked up the book before, you're looking at it and you're like, what's Advanced Combat? Where's regular combat at? Where's regular magic at? But this is advanced, right? Because a lot of people aren't realizing that you need the melee box or the wizard box, and that was the basics. And even then, that's confusing because it says advanced combat, not advanced melee. Or not advanced, it says advanced magic, not advanced wizard. So even then they're still confused, right? I think the original one was advanced melee and advanced wizard back there, but in the Labyrinth, I'm going to have to check on that. Maybe I'm wrong. But that's what I think. But anyway, I think a good facelift for the main book. I don't think they have to go through every book and give them all facelift and stuff like that. But definitely, I think it'd be time. It's already been a few years. And I'll tell you right now, do you really think if they reformatted it and made some new artwork and stuff like that for it, and made it all super pretty, that all the people who bought the Fantasy Trip wouldn't jump right back in on it? I definitely know I would. Now, the thing is, how many people have come in and died out of the Fantasy Trip already? Some people have gotten into it and because of nostalgia and they're still stuck in it. I was a new guy, actually. I've played Melee. I never played in the Fantasy Trip at all. So, it all depends. But I think that would be a worthwhile thing to think. And this is proof in the pudding that a nice cover, you may not be able to judge a book by its cover, but you will buy one because of it. There is no doubt in that. That's a marketing truth. Anyway, guys, that is my video. I will see you next time for the Car Wars video. And you guys have a good day.